Good day everyone, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be going over tanks that I want to see added to War Thunder. Now, obviously with the same as the planes one, they're going to be a random mix. There's going to be more tanks than planes because, excuse me, had a burp there. The reason for that is because there are a lot of tanks that I want to see added that have never been added to War Thunder. And well, I'll say right off the bat, most of these are going to be SPG slash tank destroyers, some light tanks, and um, one or two maybe armored cars. We'll see. So we started out straight away with the Type 1 Honey 2. Now, obviously, in War Thunder, we have the Honey 1 and the Honey 3. Why not the Honey 2? Now, the Honey 2 is basically a Honey 1 with the 105mm gun. Now, I'm not certain of penetration values, but I'm guessing this gun could fire heat, so that would probably negate poor penetration. And, well, it's based on the chassis of the Chiha, which is a good chassis, and it's got the same armor as the regular Chiha, and the gun shield is exactly the same as the Chiha, or the Honi 1 and Honi 3. So, it'll have the same mobility, but just a bigger gun. Obviously, a bigger reload as well, but that's worthy of, let's say, 2.0 BR, and it's on a good chassis, so you know it's going to be reliable. It won't take a lot of hits to destroy this thing, but if you play it right, you don't need to take hits. Next up is the Elector. Now, this is a British developed SPG, and the variant I want to see in game is the Mark II, which, if you can see on the variants page there, had the QF 6-pounder. Now, the 6-pounder is a very good anti-tank gun. However, because of it being a very lightly armored vehicle, and obviously the 6-pounder being quite powerful and having a good fire rate, the only real way I could see this thing being added is if we have the Mark II and we significantly reduce its reload, but give it a low BR, maybe like 2.7 or so, or sorry, 2.0. I got my English wrong there. 2.0 to 2.7, maybe nerf its reload a little bit, but obviously it's got no armor, so maybe that won't be necessary. Or alternatively, the Mark 1 with the 95mm howitzer, give that some heat, and that should do just fine. Now the Elector, I'm not certain what it's based off. It looks like a Tetrarch from here. And, oh wait, no, I can see it here. It's the Harry Hopkins tank chassis. I've never heard of that. So, let's just have a look. I've never heard of that tank, so the drive wheels reminded me of a Tetrarch. That's why it looked like one. So next up is the T30 RT. Now the T38 is a Russian amphibious light tank, and that gun may look very familiar to some people. That is the T60's gun, the 20mm which can fire HVAP. This is also amphibious, so you can obviously go into small rivers, maybe even flank using the water, and I'm not certain of the top speed of water, but I think it's only about 6 miles an hour, so you're not going to be going very fast, but at least you're going to be getting somewhere where some tanks might not be able to. And with a decent cannon, when upgraded mind you, it'll do just fine. Armor's non-existent, but the turret should be able to take a hit or two. So the next one is the Marder 2. Now obviously this is a Marder based off the Panzer II chassis. And well, it's armed with the Pak 40 cannon. And since it's on a Panzer II chassis, you could drop its BR quite significantly. But bear in mind it does have the Pak 40. So since the Marder 3 is at 2.7 and the Marder 3H is 3.0, why not put this thing at 2.3? Or maybe even up tier the Marder 3, up tier the Marder 3H, and put this thing at 2.7. We'll have to see, but this tank destroyer is something that I've wanted to see for a long time because it's on a good chassis, it's got good mobility, and it's got a very good gun. The Pak 40 is one of my favorite guns. Next up is the 15cm SIG, which I think means infantry something, Panzerkampfwagen 1. Now, this is basically a Panzer 1 chassis, heavily modified to carry the same gun as the Sturm Panzer 2. Now, as far as I've been able to tell, both of these tanks were named the Bison. Personally, I wouldn't call this thing the Bison. I'd call it the what the heck is that? But that's just me. So, because the Sturm Panzer 2 is at 2.0, and this thing is very easy to spot because it's literally just a box on top of a Panzer 1, I'd probably say 1.3 to 1.7 would be a good battle rating. Obviously, the Panzer 1 chassis has reasonable mobility, but you've got to take into consideration the fact that it's got no armor. I mean, the thickest armor, according to Wikipedia, is 13mm thick. That'll barely stop a 30 cal. So we've just got to take those into consideration and just go from there. Now, the only problem I can see is, according to this, there was actually no room to stow any ammunition. So how many rounds would this thing carry, is the question. Because if it couldn't carry any on the tank, it cannot be ammo racked. So I have no idea, people, but I guess we'd have to see. Next up is the A10 Cruiser Mark II. Now, a lot of people were expecting this thing to come in with the British tanks when they were first added. Unfortunately, it was not. We got the A13, which is still a decent tank, but I'd love to see the A10 Cruiser. Now, the A10 Cruiser, according to this, was identified as a heavy cruiser, which, I mean, okay, but the armor I wouldn't exactly call it heavy. It had a 2-pounder gun, a couple of machine guns, same as the A13 in that respect. But it has a good top speed of about 25 miles an hour. So it's got good mobility, but the armor is pretty poor, as with all cruiser tanks. But it's got a decent gun, and maybe it could fit in at around 1.3 to 1.7. We'll find out. Now, the next one's going to be a bit of an interesting one to balance. The Covenanter. Now, in real life, the Covenanter was terrible. In real life, it was actually supposed to be a welder tank, but the company that built it didn't actually have welders. So, you can see. It was meant to be a replacement for the Crusader, but unfortunately, it was never developed fully. A couple of prototypes built, a couple of training vehicles, but other than that, this vehicle did not have anything special. So, it did have a 2-pounder gun, same as with the A10 Cruiser, a machine gun, relatively okay armor. It was about the same as the Crusader. But the Covenanter did, in real life, have some very bad problems with overheating. Obviously, in War Thunder, that won't apply. But the Covenanter would be an interesting addition because it's got higher top speed than the Crusader. It's got slightly better armor in places. And, well, it's actually just as maneuverable as a Crusader. So maybe 2.7. That would then give you an excuse to up tier the Crusader Mark III, or maybe even down tier the Crusader Mark II, and then give it the Covenanter, just after that, and then give the Crusader Mark III. At least that's my opinion. Now we're going to move on to the tank that I don't think will ever be added. This is the Type 5 Horu. Now, essentially, this is I believe it is a Hargo chassis. And this chassis was obviously heavily modified to take the 47mm gun that you may be familiar with on a Chiha Kai, which is a great tank, by the way. Now, obviously, the armor, well, from what I've been able to find, there's not a lot about this vehicle, just to point out, people. There is really not a lot about this vehicle. And I'm guessing the armor is the same thickness as the Hargo, so you will not take a hit. But the 47 on this thing is very good. So I reckon about a rating of 1.3 to 1.7 would be sufficient. Because obviously everything will be able to penetrate this thing, but this will be able to penetrate everything it sees. That's how I see it anyway. And the Hargo chassis is a very maneuverable chassis as it is. So we'd have to see. But obviously I don't think this thing's going to ever get added because I think it was a one-time prototype and it was not very good. in its role in real life, but maybe as a 1.3 to 1.7 tank destroyer, it could come in handy. Next up is one that is apparently on the Chinese server, the M3A3 Stewart. Now, obviously this is an image from the War Thunder forum, but it's actually on Google. The M3A3 Stewart was basically the predecessor to the M5 Stewart. Not a lot to go over. Just imagine a slightly worse M5 Stewart and you'll get this tank. So, the M3A3 would be an interesting addition, maybe a 2.0 light tank, or maybe in a bracket with the M5 Stewart. We'd have to see, but there's not a lot to go over this vehicle because it's pretty much an M5 Stewart. Next up is one I can already feel people screaming at the screen at me for. The M8 Greyhound. Now, most of those would say, oh, the M8 Greyhound has already been added. Yes, it has, but you have to take into consideration that is an event vehicle. We don't actually have a regular tree M8 Greyhound, which is disappointing because this is one of the most produced armored cars by the US. And well, it's just an armored car that I've always wanted in game because in ARB you see a lot of these things in convoys and you can wipe them out easily. But just because you can wipe them out easily doesn't mean it can't be a threat when you're playing it in Tank RB. But we'd have to see, obviously. I don't think Gaijin's planning on introducing a regulatory M8 Greyhound for a bit. But it's just something I'd want to see added because it is a unique armored car and it was very popular during the war. And final vehicle, which I don't think is ever going to get added personally, is a T30 Howitzer gun motor carriage. Now this one took a bit of finding, but essentially it's an M3 half-track with the 75mm howitzer, which you may be familiar with. Well, it's pretty much the same howitzer you may be familiar with on the M8 Scott. Obviously not the M8A1, the regular M8 in the actual tech tree. Now the heat round is exactly the same, but obviously it's a half track, it's not exactly designed to take armor, and well, you can see here 9.5mm. It has good storage for ammunition, but if your armor's designed to stop a 30 cal from 230 meters away, that's a bit worrying. But to be fair, the M3 half tracks have never been designed to take hits, and well, the good mobility and the high fire rate of this gun will prove it to be pretty effective and punchy. And obviously with a top speed of 40 miles an hour, it'll be pretty effective as well. Just watch out for aircraft. But like I say, this thing probably won't get added, and the Type 5 Horu probably won't get added. The only reason why is because, well, the T30 might get added, but the Horu I severely doubt it. Because it was a one-time thing and none survived to this day. But you never know, we might get them added. So that's just a couple of vehicles that I wanted to see added to War Thunder. I hope you enjoyed today's tank look over. Obviously, I may do premiums in the future, and Jane Prawn has already said that he wants to join me on that. Perfectly fine. But if you've got any vehicles that you might want to see added, post them in the comments, and excuse me, and I'll take a peek myself because you never know, might be a vehicle that I want. Anyway, that's it for today, and I will catch you all on the next one.